So I'm trained as an opera singer. Sometimes it's overwhelming. There's so much good work to do in the world. Fundraisers are beacons of light and hope, illuminating the path to the good work that needs to be done in the world today. Change happens at the rate of people, and people change systems.
All right, welcome to another great episode of the Dre and Smiley Podcast.
Awesome, Dre. I am super stoked to have Yolanda F. Johnson on our show. I found her on LinkedIn, and let me read her bio. Yolanda F. Johnson is a sought-after philanthropy, fundraising, and DEI expert, a trailblazing figure on the national landscape. She has developed strategies to raise more than $1 billion for nonprofits while also advising philanthropists and grant makers. With her faith as her guide, she is a champion of equity for women in the sectors of fundraising, philanthropy, and DEI. In addition to leading YFJ Consulting's LLC, Yolanda is a founder of WOC, Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy, and of Allies in Action membership network. Yolanda has also had an outstanding career as a performing artist. Wow, she's a singer. And she has used her background as a performer to view fundraising and philanthropy through a creative lens. She is thrilled to be a founding member of the Women Philanthropy Alliance. Wow, it seems like you're an angel. You give back a lot of philanthropy. Please tell us, how did you get into this amazing work? How did you get into philanthropy? Was that something you wanted to do as a young lady, as a young child? How did this organically begin?
Organically, it began because of my life as an artist, but my entire career has had two distinct paths that connect and seg in certain different spaces and places with philanthropy, fundraising, and music. So I'm trained as an opera singer. When I was getting my bachelor's degree in performance, we had this just continuous closing of orchestras around the country. We called it like an epidemic. And it was financial mismanagement, artists who didn't quite understand the business side of things and the fundraising and philanthropy side of things. And so I had a professor, I said, if you're in dance, you can probably perform to pre-recorded music. I can't do a Marriage of Figaro to a CD. I'm dating myself. To a CD. At least it's not to an 8-track or something, but to a CD, I can't do that. And he was like, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I'm going to make sure that I figure out the other side of the arts and how to keep it going. And it really taught me so much. I'm so grateful. So I did that performance degree, and then I went on to graduate school and did arts administration with a focus in philanthropy and in fundraising. And so the rest is history. I've been able to use performance practice to help people make asks personally and professionally. But it all started because I wanted to make sure that the arts was a healthy sector. And that I always even had a place to produce and create art.
No, that's I like that. We had on our podcast a guest on earlier, and he was a wealthy individual, and he has his fundraiser, and he says sometimes it's easier to make the money than it is to give it away because of all the business side of it. And then I thought about Bill Gates when he gave $30 billion to Buffett for his nonprofit organization. So what would you say is a challenge with the philanthropy? Something that makes it challenging or difficult to give away money or to do good deeds with the money you raise?
Well, I would surmise it's a couple of things. And from my own experience as well, sometimes it's overwhelming. There's so much good work to do in the world that you just want to be everywhere. You want to make sure that people aren't hungry. You want to make sure that people are educated. You want to make sure that there's racial and gender equity. You want to make sure nobody's homeless. And if you had all the money in the world and could do that, you would. But you have what you have. And with a grateful heart, you have to really prioritize. And so that's one of the things I do in my consulting practice is help philanthropists prioritize their, the good work they want to do. So from the philanthropy side, it's surrounding yourself with professionals who understand the ins and outs. And sometimes you need to set up the foundation. What's the entity look like? The most wealthy people, you can't find them because they don't necessarily want to be found. They want their grant making entity to be found, but they also want to be able to have the freedom to navigate without people always coming to them for areas that may not resonate with them. They wish those causes well, but they have their own priorities. So understanding who you are as a philanthropist, and then surrounding yourself with the people who can help you move that forward, who can help identify the people who may be most in need and find those pathways to be able to help them in a meaningful way and in a way that doesn't prescribe. So Peggy Delaney Rockefeller said it best. I have a show actually in philanthropy where I interviewed her, Meet the Philanthropist. And that was really a game-changing moment for me when she said, I have a lot of wealth and I have a lot of things that I want to do with that, but she has learned to involve the communities. So that's a really community-based approach rather than a white savior approach, rather than, this is what I want to do. And so I'm going to put that on you. That may not be what the people need. And so you have to listen and be curious and understand what people need and not prescribe what they need so that you can actually partner with them and provide it. And then I think on the other side of things, we have to get away from the transactional model of fundraising. And so stop seeing people as checkbooks and dollar signs and see them as individuals. I have a quote that I've become known for, two different quotes. And one is that, fundraisers are beacons of light and hope, illuminating the path to the good work that needs to be done in the world today. And by that, I mean, don't just bulldoze through conversations. Get to know your donors. Get to know what motivates them. Be partners in the journey. You're illuminating that path for them. So it's a very noble profession. And on the other side, I say don't treat your donors of color like DEI ATMs.
Oh, I like it.
Because donors of color, Black donors, all the above, they're people who have different interests and beautiful characteristics of those individuals. They may like fine art. They may like music. They may like culinary arts. They may like anything. So get to know who they are. They probably will support something that's a diversity initiative or that's being inclusive, but don't just not hit them over the head with, hey, we're doing this. Don't you want to give to it? When you meet them where they are and understand who they are as people, that's a beautiful thing. And again, we get away from that transactional sort of method and model.
So that's great, Yolanda. There's a lot to unpack there. The first thing I really want to make sure our listeners heard is you have your own show as well. Give us the title of that show. What's the name of your show?
I have a couple of different spaces I inhabit that way. So the one I just mentioned is Meet the Philanthropist, where I have conversations with philanthropists and ask them about how they approach their philanthropy, or philanthropic professionals who are out there moving and shaking and doing the research on millennial donors, or, lots of different areas of analyzing what's happening in the field. I have another one called Deconstructing Development, where we break things down in the field for people who are on the other side doing the fundraising. And then with Woke, Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy, we are launching something called, we have one called Views from the C-Suite, where women of color come who are in the C-Suite tell us about their career trajectory. But then we have one that's called Woke's the Word. Haven't you heard Woke's the Word? And with that one, we're turning it into what I call the nonprofit view. So I'm kind of like the Whoopi Goldberg, and I have co-hosts who are different women of color. And then we have a woman who's a white ally who gives us that perspective. And we tackle things like, we broach the topic of, if Kanye West wanted to give you $1 million in the midst of all of the chaos that he had, would you accept it? Like, donor ethics.
That's
So
tough. That's tough. So, okay. So, I'm glad you laid that out there for our listeners, looking listen to you and your content in those different spaces. So, so here's a question
thank
for
you.
you.
Thank you for asking.
So, DEI 3 years ago
Hmm.
was everywhere, right? You could close your eyes and
Hmm.
walk down the street and trip over it. Every company, organization they were throwing money at it, as fast as they could. Today, it seems to almost be like a 180. I was reading an article this morning where there's a DEI director, manager, leader at a university. 7 months into his role, he got notified that that department at that university is being shut down. I've read other articles where universities have been instructed to remove DEI language from their communication. Give me your thoughts on all that.
Well, DEI is under attack in the United States, and the entire nonprofit and philanthropic sectors are now. I am part of groups and thought leader groups and thought partner groups of everybody that's trying to really unpack this and see what the recent Supreme Court decision against affirmative action, how it's going to trickle down and what it's going to mean. So, of course, in higher education, which is the example that you just gave, it's already there, front and center. They're in the midst of it, trying to navigate it and deal with it. What I will say is, as far as higher ed is concerned, I believe that most institutions are still dedicated to the concept of DEI. The D has become a
Mm,
four-letter word. It's the D that's most under attack. So I actually just have a quote that we released called
mm,
Defending the D. Um, we start with the I because without the I, you can't really have the other letters. There's so many acronyms. There's JEDI, EIDB, IDEA, DEI. So, um, I think that I've seen some very creative. I'm not going to give them away because I know that people are coming up with different tactics and strategies to continue to move the work forward. Now, we saw a precursor to this several months ago. I was sitting with the CEO of a major search firm, and I said, I cannot tell if this is malicious or not, but I'm noticing that DEI roles are starting to be restructured. They're not necessarily eliminating them in many instances, but they're moving people around. They're changing it. It's under professional
mm,
development now. It's under, you name it.
Mhm.
It's just somewhere else because what we finally determined is people were trying to protect it. I call it, it's a bit of an underground
mm,
railroad for diversity, equity, and inclusion of
Mhm.
people trying to take it and protect it. Sometimes you have to hide it. Sometimes you have to restructure it, but trying to keep some semblance of it, even though you can't really say that anymore because we're bound now. And there's a lot of fear, especially when something becomes law that can start to impact
yeah.
other areas.
Mhm.
And I think that in other areas, it's going to come down to language. It's very much a semantics issue. So we're starting to speak differently instead of necessarily saying DEI. It's fascinating. I just literally like 2 days ago rewrote something where I refuse to go past a certain threshold. Like I'm not gonna pretzel and bend myself over backwards to where I just I'm sick to my stomach because it's just so wrong that we have to be
Sure.
doing this in the first place.
Mhm.
But you have to play the long game and be smart and be strategic. So we're speaking about it in different ways that will still allow the work to be done, but will protect it because that acronym has become such a trigger for certain communities who are in positions of power and who are attacking it.
Just one quick follow up comment is, in terms of, I agree, and I think it's important not to, as you said, bend over like a pretzel trying to, you know, completely change the intent of the message and the content. What's important is what you just described, which is making sure that the frequency that's communicated in is one that will be heard and received well, right? And so, I think that's important. I was speaking to someone yesterday who said they were telling another person, it was a black woman who was speaking to a white guy, who said, "Well, I just had to tell him that white people don't understand black people, and you need to be more understanding of black people." Okay, so in my head, as soon as I heard that message, Yolanda, I'm thinking, I wonder what that white guy heard when you said that. That's what I was thinking, right? So it's all about the message. How do you craft the message, right? So it's palatable. So when it's sent and it's received, it creates an opportunity for dialogue and inclusion. So I'm glad you shared what you shared in terms of, the evolution that's taking place and the importance of crafting it a little differently here and there as needed. So I'm glad you said that.
You have to know your audience. That's where it goes back into authentic performance practice, understanding your audience. And what I have always said, and my theory of change with my company, with all the work I do, and I've had clients from large university systems to corporations to, it's really run the gamut to nonprofit organizations. And you cannot hit people over the head with the work because you have to meet human beings where they are. And so the work cannot be done holistically. It is done individually that impacts the whole. The individual change informs the whole. Change happens at the rate of people, and people change systems.
I, I,
And
I, know,
so
I know that's not a quote, but I'm like, could you repeat that verbatim?
I saw that on the
I
shirt.
know.
That's a shirt logo.
So for those who are listening, I encourage you rewind that little piece that she said because that resonates so well, right? In terms of it's not a holistic approach,
thank
right?
you.
It's an individual approach. You can't.
When you do it holistically, people get ticked off. I've had groups be like, you know what? When I go and I train people and somebody will pull me aside and say, I'm so sick of this. I'm sick of hearing about it. That's one of the things, the pendulum swings. We're getting the backlash now. Why do I have to go to 5 different seminars on it? And then it becomes performative in some places. I checked my box. I gave my gift. Can everything be okay? We started seeing that shift. I started calling it in April 2021 with the advent of the COVID vaccine and the wide availability of the vaccine. The world started to reopen with that golden era for a couple of months there in the spring and summer of 2021. Mm-hmm. And that's really when this pendulum started to swing, because it was like, oh, isn't it okay now? Like, do we still have to talk about it? And I'm like, well, imagine if it was your lived experience every day of your life, And there's another quote that to those accustomed to privilege, equity can seem like oppression. And so I just saw someone do a different take on that with some current events, which I know we don't have to get into, but they said, to those who have never been accountable, accountability can seem like persecution.
Yeah, I could see that. Wow. Well, no, I was wondering, tell me this. It seems like when the George Floyd incident occurred, everyone was in the DEI. Why is it, from your experience, every time there's some sort of tragedy, Ahmaud or whoever, Tyrese Rice or whatever, whenever something tragic happens, everyone jumps on the DEI bandwagon. And then it's like, let's wait till the next illogical murder of someone, and then we'll bring it back up and the pendulum goes back the other way. Do you think, is there, from your experience and your perspective, do you think it's changing? Meaning, each time we have a tragedy and the pendulum swings, we pick up a whole bunch or a small percentage of people we didn't have the last time. Then the next tragedy, the group of understanders or people who understand our culture or understand diversity, inclusion, it just gets better. Is the trend getting better or worse? I guess that's the bottom line question.
Well, I think one of the interesting critical junctures that we faced with, gosh, isn't it sad that we have too many examples to call upon? Tyree, the young man who was killed like a block from his mother's house. And that's when that was a whole other thing, because that happened, a few months after the mass shooting with the Chinese Lunar New Year holiday. And that's when we took a step back and we actually did a whole program on this for Allies in Action. How do you process when you're starting to become desensitized to it? Because then it starts to become this weird form of entertainment. And, you know, I was upset when that happened because I wasn't ready to see that footage.
Right.
I walked into the living room and my partner was watching it and with his dad. And I was just like, oh, wish you would have told me that you had that on, because I wasn't ready for that. I needed some more time to process. I needed to not be, you know, my autonomy had been taken from me in a sense, because I didn't want to see another Black man be murdered like that. But, you know, people were really twisted in knots about that. Do I want to see this? How do we process it? That was a critical turning point, because does it become, oh, just another one that happened? But it ups the ante because this one's even worse. And the tragedy factor gets upped because he was calling out for his mother and was just down the street from her house. And again, because it didn't need to happen the way that it happened. It shouldn't have happened at all. So I think that there's an issue, you know, just like the other term. I don't know if I should
Now
say
you got to
this
say
on
it.
the air, but in the
You got to say it.
nonprofit
You got to
sector,
say it.
no, but there's the concept of poverty porn. And so, you know, like, oh, the poor children, oh, the poor people. And I get, you know, I've gone through this even with clients and with different people. Oh, we need more pictures of the impoverished people on there so that donors understand better. And I'm like, how about we show them one, so they get where people are coming from? Why don't we share a success story instead? You know, so people don't wallow in all of the negative. So I think that it's a very loaded answer, where I think that's a real consideration there, is how much are we seeing? How desensitized are we seeing, are becoming to it? And is it just another one in a long list where people then feel bad until the next news cycle? And then it sort of just goes out of their head because it's actually becoming the norm.
It's part of our culture.
So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen, right? So I think that with DEI, you know, in 2020, my goodness, every single organization had a statement on their website. I started Allies because I had so many white allies getting in touch with me saying, Yolanda, what do I do? And it's gone on from there. Everybody had a task force or a committee or a DEI this or that, a working group. And now it's about accountability and what did you do? What change did you actually make in your workplace? What change did you make in your life? Because you can't leave this at work either. It has to go, you know, when you leave the office or you log off from working at home, the way you live your life has to reflect these principles of equity and inclusion and diversity as well, and helping people belong. And I think that that's a compartmentalization that has happened as well. And I don't have the answer. We actually did a whole session and had a therapist and some clergy and some different people come help. Like, how do we process this? How do you protect yourself? We called it digital disturbance. Because when you have all these images thrown at you, you don't want that to become normal. It should still be just as sickening. You know, it makes me go back to Emmett Till. Around the same time that happened with Tyre Nichols, I watched the movie Till. And I actually thought that should have had a different warning on it, because I didn't know they were going to. Did you see that movie?
No, because I was afraid it would have that type of content.
Oh, it showed it. I was like, what? But you know what? I get it. And she needed to. I wish that it had a flag or something on it to have prepared me for it, because it was weeks. So add that to walking into the living room and seeing the footage of that happening. I had a rough couple of months, but I understood even better why that was the turning point for the modern civil rights movement. People got ticked off when they saw that. They were like, no, enough is enough. We have to take action. And that was that real turning point, is seeing that young man be murdered the way that he was. But it was rough. So I'll give you that warning. Watch it. I think it should be watched. But I was like, whew,
It was a lot.
Well, tell
Okay.
me this. I want to switch
Okay.
gears just a little bit. You talked about the women of color. Tell us about that. Is that
Hmm.
women of color, say African American women, Indian women, Hispanic women, white women, or is it just like the Benetton, the young people? It's like a clothing brand of all colors. Is that what that is?
Whoa, you took us way back.
Talk about aging
Yeah.
yourself.
I know my daughter was like, "Daddy, what's Benetton?"
Yeah. Yeah. For those that are like 40 and under, they're like, Benetton, what is that? I don't know what you're talking about.
So,
Oh my goodness. Yes, it's all of the above.
all right.
I was the first Black president of an organization in New York that was a big diversity milestone, Women in Development. And in its 40-year history, we were like, really, the first in New York City? Yeah, that was the case. And so we launched a diversity and inclusion task force. The report came out like 2 weeks before George Floyd.
Oh.
And so it was very timely. I was already doing the work. I was already in the DEI space, but you can't make up that momentum.
Mhm.
And so I realized that there had to be places for us all to come together because we need allies and we need people to be in our corner. But we still needed a space for the very distinct and unique lived experience of women of color in the philanthropic and nonprofit sectors. And so I created that space. Because the other thing that we have to do is learn about each other and get away from the scarcity mindset, that there's not enough for my group and therefore I need to take from you. We need to get away from that whole Asian model minority, which tries to turn them against Black people. We see that happening now with the affirmative action decision. So I was like, we need a space that's safe enough to be honest about those things so that we can tackle the scarcity mindset between our different groups while celebrating what each group brings to the table. So it's a beautiful mix of Black women of all backgrounds. We've got people AAPI. We have everybody represented, Native American, of course, Latina. So it's really been a pivotal sort of thing, and it took off like wildfire, across the country and even internationally. I'll be over in the UK in
Wow.
October at a university in Ireland talking to them about race relations and DEI and equity in Ireland. And we'll be in London at the London School of Economics because that's a whole other
Wow.
different aspect of the diaspora, with
Yeah,
what
yeah.
they faced. So we're everywhere and we're all
Wow.
different backgrounds because divided we fall. And a lot of people have been trying to divide us so that we couldn't move forward. And so now we're trying to think differently.
When you travel outside of the US and say I'm in Senegal and I say, well, what's going on with race relations in the US, or you're in Australia or you're in the UK or even Ireland, what do you find is the most perplexing question of their understanding of what we're really going through in the US? Because they're on the outside looking in, and you're in the inside going out, and they're like, well, why did the police hate Black people? When I was working in Europe, they just couldn't understand why did the police keep killing the Black people, and why do they kill them unarmed? Why do they release a dog when they're on their knees? They just can't understand the mindset of that. Do you get those sort of questions, or what do you find from a professional perspective when you speak to people outside of the US looking in?
Well, one of the most dangerous things that people are starting to say is, oh, DEI is an American thing.
Oh,
Mm.
And so that is not the case because you ask me that question, I can flip that right on its head and say, hey, what about Windrush Brits?
yeah.
Everybody has something just because of the history of the world and of the Western world and of colonialism. There are
Mm.
issues afoot everywhere. You could ask the
Everywhere.
folks in Senegal what's happening with their,
Hmm.
current administration and political climate. Everybody
Mm.
could ask everybody another question about things and help them to be more introspective and take a look at themselves. What was it that what Jesus say? You get the plank in your eye. It's so big, you're looking at talking to somebody else about it, but you don't see the big chunk of wood in your own eye. So I think
Mm.
that when we have, and it's not necessarily malicious or negative when they ask those questions, but sometimes they're just like, oh, what's going on over there? You guys need to get it together. And we're like, we do need to get it together. Um, and what's going on, how does this relate? It's not just something that's in the United States.
Hmm.
It's not just a concept that is uniquely American. And it's something where I hope that when you ask that question, something about it resonates with you, where you'll try to help make change in your own community, and maybe you'll support an initiative that's happening in America. That compartmentalization, that xenophobia, that nationalism, negative nationalism, where we separate ourselves and try to be an island, doesn't work. So it's all hands on deck when it comes to being more inclusive and to stopping violence against people of color.
Yolanda, I wish we had 2 hours to spend. The time is like getting away from us. But a couple quick questions before we transition forward here. One is August. August is a significant month, and as it relates to philanthropy. Talk to us about that.
August is Black Philanthropy Month. And this is a concept that's been around for decades. I just had a really poignant, important conversation with the founder of it, Dr. Jacqueline Copeland. I think she's in Brazil right now, to your point, Kevin, talking to Black folks in Brazil about, the different issues that they face there, and how we bring it's a global movement. It's not just it's Black Philanthropy Month, and she very, very much made a concerted effort to connect Black people from people of African descent around the world to understand each other's issues and understand how we've always been generous and how we continue to be generous together. So it's a really interesting concept that way, that segs very well from what we just talked about with people around the world. So it's a global movement, but in the United States, of course, it celebrates Black philanthropy. And one of the other things that Woke, my organization, tries to do is dismantle the philanthropist archetype of being the wealthy white man or the wealthy white woman, to understanding that if you tithed and your grandma tithed and she took pies over to somebody else's house after church, whatever it is, however you were generous, you're a philanthropist, and your name need not be etched in the walls of great institutions to be called a philanthropist. To embrace that term and not feel otherized as though we were doing something else with our generosity. So when you start to unpack that and look at how generous we've been for hundreds of years, it's a point of pride. And so you see philanthropy differently. When you're being generous, you're being philanthropic. You may not have $1 million check, but that $200 that you gave to the YWCA or to the links or whatever, it is for a project that they were working on. That's philanthropy. Love we've got the folks too that are giving the $1 million. So let's celebrate them also.
Yeah. Well, that's great, because I donated, I want to say it was like it might have been $10 yesterday. So I guess I can call myself
you are a philanthropist, right? And embrace that. Seriously, take that with you, because that $10 is going to help someone. You were philanthropic. Philanthropy is the love of mankind. It's the love of each other. And it doesn't mean that it takes, the kids with the lemonade stand that want to go give that money to help somebody else. It's philanthropy.
Yeah. So, Smiley, I hope you spend that $10 wisely.
The one thing is...
No, but see, I love that you said that really quick. I love that you said that too, because people are also starting to look at mutual aid as philanthropy as well within communities, especially the Black and Hispanic communities, are saying, you know what? When I gave my cousin rent money, that was philanthropy too, because it kept them out of the street and they went to work and they contributed to society. Yeah.
Tell me this from the numbers perspective, because the math is the same and the data is the same. Would you rather have one person give 1 million or 1 million people give $1 on the same date? Which is...
Can I guess what the answer would be, Yolanda? And tell me, can I guess what the answer would be? I'm going to guess you'd rather have 1 million people give $1 versus one person give 1 million. And I have a reason. You want to hear my reason why? And you can tell me.
Go for it. Yeah.
Well, so in my mind, right, if you have a community working together to lift a group, it's more advantageous, because after that first giving, there'll be other gestures. It may not be money, but they're in some way they'll be working together going forward. That's just my theory. I could be completely wrong. So what's the right answer, Yolanda?
Yes, it plants a seed. I think that would be beautiful to have 1 million people giving $1 each. But listen, when it comes to fundraising, don't get me wrong here, because it is about the bottom line.
Mhm.
And when you're trying to raise the dollars, all fundraisers have goals that they need to meet. So in this hypothetical situation, I'm going to take both. I'm taking 2 million, and
She's
I'm
like,
going
I
to
want 2 million.
I'm going to take the 2 million, and I'm going to say thank you to the 1 million people, and I'm going to continue to support you and cultivate you and help you feel like the philanthropist you are. And to the 1 million person, thank you very much.
I love it.
And that's why you have a PhD in fundraising. Makes sense. So here's another question for you. And Smiley, did you have a
No, that was
follow-up, or
great. I
are you
love
set
your
there?
answer. Thank you.
Yeah. So here's another question. So you're in a bit of a unique area, right? Unique space, DEI, philanthropy, that sort of thing. And other people that are like life coaches, those that are like Tim Robbins, or others that are like, I can teach you how to make $1 million. People trip over themselves to hear the content. They sit at the edge of their seats at their workshops, and they want more. When you're done, they're like, please, can I speak to you for 20 minutes? In your space, it's a little different because that's not necessarily the case. I'm guessing most of the time when you're sharing your knowledge and your wisdom, unless it's like a specific small group. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you inspired and passionate about what you do?
I believe that this is my place in the world, and that I'm fulfilling part of my purpose in doing it. And that's why I fight so hard to get away from that transactional method and model, so that people are working with people and fulfilling the missions of different organizations and guiding people that have the resources to support things, because that's how it's people that are going to change systems and get the work going. Now, I will say I do hold a unique space in the sector, because I am very blessed to be able to deliver many keynotes throughout the year and trainings and be in front of large audiences. And I do get those people coming up to me afterwards. I didn't teach
That's
them how
great.
to make $1 million, but there may have been a concept or something that they walked away with. I always say, you know, either a concrete step or a seed planted in the right direction, whatever it is. And I've had clients come back to me months later who were a little miffed about having to do different trainings or be in certain spaces, and then they were like, actually, now I understand the role that I play.
Mm, mm,
And I know you're not engaged with us anymore. And we're not paying you, but can I talk to you about this? Because I
mm.
actually realize a change that I can make. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when I see, with Woke, we have the Woke Awards that happen every June. We just had that in New York. We honor an early career person, a young professional, a mid-career person, and then someone who's really just the award for excellence. And this year, so I can shout out these ladies, we did Guy Renee Cutting from the Fund for UNICEF.
Mhm.
And she used to be at the
Okay.
NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She and I met around Thurgood Marshall's table talking about how to bring fundraisers of color together.
Wow.
Marilyn Alexander with our Shine Award. She's at New York Presbyterian, and Megan Soretsa McManus, who is at John Jay College of Justice.
Wow.
All really just moving the work forward. And so that's what keeps me inspired also. They had me in tears, just because when you create something like a community like Woke, I stand back a lot of the time, and just you watch it happen, because you can't dictate what happens. And that's my happy place, is standing back and watching those women of color come together and be excited and be inspired by each other, and know what their next thing is that they're going to try to do, their next goal, and workshop a difficult conversation that they have to have. That's where it's at. And so I think back and I'm like, that's exactly why I did this. That's why I do this.
Mhm.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to ease into the final four. Here's the first question here. It's not the first final four question. This is the transition question.
Okay.
What's one thing that people don't know about you
Oh,
that you wish they knew?
hmm. What do people not know about me? I feel like I'm on the Family Feud,
Right,
the final round, and I'm like, I just got the because I took too long. Can we come back to that one?
sure.
Sure. We'll come
Okay,
back to it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well,
because people know me. I'm pretty transparent. So I'm like, what do people not know?
well,
Okay. We'll come back
here's
to it.
one. The first final four question is, if you could have dinner, anyone alive or dead, and you have four chairs at the table, you're in one seat, three other members are at your table, alive or dead, who would you want to have dinner with and why?
How many people do I get to
Three.
pick? 3? Ooh, okay. Jesus, number 1.
Black Jesus or white Jesus?
Don't get you started.
Don't answer
Is that what you're thinking, Yolanda? Don't get you started.
You got a preacher's kid here too. You know what? You know what? We'd all be like, "Whoops," just Jesus.
Just Jesus.
Exactly
Okay,
as
just Jesus.
So we got Jesus. We got oh goodness. I guess I'd have to bring it down to Madam C.J. Walker.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Just to talk to her about her whole. We're having her great granddaughter come, and she wrote a book that's the Netflix series is based on. So our book club with Woke is going to be talking to her about a lot of that and learning so much about what they did to support opera and the arts. Like Black people in the arts. And then, gosh, I guess, so I know. So it's a tie between her and Florence Price, who's a Black woman composer who did the first symphony that was premiered in the United States because of everything she went through, escaping Jim Crow, had to come north to be able to create her music. And then, okay. People are going to be surprised. Maybe this answers your question. What do people not know?
There it is.
I would have Marie Antoinette.
Okay.
Because I think she is the biggest scapegoat in history. And I think so many like politics and gender politics and all the different things that came into play around her. I think that she was very much misunderstood and scapegoated. People who lose their heads can't tell their side of the story. And so history has told such a side to her story that I have found isn't necessarily true. And I find that to be fascinating, how you can still be such a villain and a divisive character hundreds of years later.
Awesome.
Great. All right. What's been your greatest success?
My greatest success, I would have to say it's Woke. Just creating that space and to see what it's become, and to see the impact that it's had, that people will tell me it's had on their lives and careers. So that's been pretty great. Followed a close second by a music composition that I created called Shout for Joy that was just represented 2 weeks ago. And that was pretty cool.
Congratulations.
Do you get a chance to sing often?
I do.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
I and I have an album of spirituals. I specialize in spirituals in the Underground Railroad, and all the hidden meanings and covert meanings behind spirituals and that lived experience of the enslaved Africans and just imagining what that was like, and that wasn't that long ago. So I want to remind people as we go and we see these very problematic and shady things happening around laws and people trying to overturn things. I mean, just think of what our parents and grandparents, I think of my grandfather, rest his soul. I think of him sometimes and how his brother, they were in a sundown town in Oklahoma and stayed too late one night and had to leave and flee for fear of being lynched. And then that makes me think of Emmett Till. And I'm like, this stuff didn't happen that long ago. So we have to definitely stay the course.
Yeah. So the name of the album and where our listeners can get it if they're interested.
Feel the Spirit.
Feel the Spirit. Okay.
They can get it wherever Music is sold. It's on Amazon. It's all over the
There
place.
are no more albums.
How good does it feel to say that? You can buy it wherever music is sold.
It feels great.
That's awesome.
That was really a labor of love, and
Yeah.
and I'm really proud of it, and I'm happy to share that music with people, and find it and listen to it. And I have a
Awesome.
concert lecture that I do around that called the Spirituals Experience.
Awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Here's the third question. What is your superpower? Superman has this strength, he could fly. Wonder Woman, she has an invisible jet. And the Flash is really fast. What is Yolanda's superpower?
My superpower would be bringing people together, convening people in a meaningful way, and helping them to understand the role that they play in good work that needs to be done.
Awesome.
Nice. So if you were to write your life's story, what would the title of your autobiography be?
Crafting a Life.
Crafting a life.
Ah, you clearly thought about this.
People keep asking me when I'm going to write my book, and I'm like,
Awesome. Well, Yolanda.
Right.
Crafting a Life, because that's what I call it. It seems people are like, wow, you do a lot of stuff. And I'm actually I see it just on two different paths that connect and seg. And I want to do what I want to do. Maybe that's my superpower also, is being hyper efficient in a way that allows me to do what I want to be doing.
See, I thought you were going to say your superpower is your voice. Because of the opera and the spirituals and the singing, but it's all wrapped and embodied into one. So that's a craft.
It is. It's in crafting the life. I think my superpower, actually, I guess I would articulate it that way, is it's that I find a way to fulfill the different areas of my purpose, because I used to have a bit of an identity crisis around it all. Like, oh, do I do this or do I do that? And when people Google me, and then the philanthropy people see the music and the music people see the philanthropy, do they get confused? And I'm like, you know what, everybody, this is me.
It's one person.
All of the above.
This is so cool in the sense that if you're the second one where this happened to us, we had a guest on.
Yeah.
This lady we found, she was a doctor of astrophysicist, and I saw her on the Discovery Channel. And when we invited her on, she said we were the first one to invite her on for her science and her technology, whereas she's a jazz singer in London. And we didn't even know she was a jazz singer. And with you, it's the same.
See?
I didn't know you were an opera singer till I read your bio, because I just saw your DEI stuff on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, she sounds interesting. But once again, people are so, it's like a quilt. They have so many different nuances of themselves that make them all totally beautiful and comprehensively amazing. Yeah. So I want to thank you first for responding to my LinkedIn, second for being here, and third for making me feel like I'm a philanthropist, because I get $5, $10 all the time, but I never thought I was a philanthropist.
You are.
I feel good, Dre.
I'm telling you.
Yes. Hey, I'm going to tell my daughter. I'm going to tell my daughter right now. You made me a philanthropist.
Sweetheart, you are a philanthropist. That is right.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. No, it's been great having you on. Like Smiley was saying earlier, we don't have, all of our guests are unique. All of them are unique. And we just enjoy hearing these stories from everyday people that are living extraordinary lives. Keep doing the work you're doing. We look forward to having you back on, of course.
Of course, I'd love to be. Thanks for having me.
Get the book done, the autobiography. Once you get the book done, we'll definitely like to have you back on. So,
well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. You are a delight to speak with, both of you.